911, what's your emergency?
A nun butchered in her own chapel, and the priest everyone trusted was hiding the blade. April 5th, 1980, Toledo, Ohio. The city was quiet that morning, the streets hushed with the solemn anticipation of Easter. Inside the Mercy Hospital Chapel, Sister Margaret Ann Pahl prepared for the day's rituals. At 61 years old, she was devoted, disciplined, and deeply respected. Her life revolved around faith, service, and the quiet rhythm of prayer. The chapel was dimly lit, its air heavy with incense and silence. Candles flickered against stained glass, casting fractured colors across the altar. Sister Margaret moved with calm precision, arranging linens, preparing for Mass, her hands steady with years of devotion. But that morning, something was wrong. When she failed to appear later, concern spread quickly among the other nuns. A search began, and soon Sister Margaret was found, lying near the altar, strangled and stabbed. Her body bore 31 wounds, many arranged in a pattern that seemed ritualistic, almost symbolic. The horror of the scene was magnified by its setting, a sacred space desecrated by violence. The discovery sent shockwaves through Toledo. A nun murdered in her own chapel on Holy Saturday. It was unthinkable. Whispers spread through the community. Who could commit such an act? Why here? Why now? Police arrived, documenting the scene with grim precision. The wounds, the strangulation marks, the altar cloth stained with blood, all pointed to a crime both brutal and deliberate. And yet, the chapel remained eerily silent, as if holding its secrets close. For the sisters, grief mingled with fear. The sanctuary they had trusted was now a crime scene. For investigators, the case was immediately complex. No forced entry, no clear motive, and a victim whose life had been defined by devotion. And in the shadows of that chapel, suspicion began to form. The Mercy Hospital Chapel was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place untouched by violence, yet investigators quickly realized the crime was not random. There was no forced entry, no signs of a break-in. Whoever killed Sister Margaret had access, and likely knew the rhythms of the chapel. Attention turned to the clergy. Among them was Father Gerald Robinson, a 42-year-old priest who had been nearby that morning. Robinson was quiet, reserved, and respected within the church. But something about his demeanor unsettled detectives. He seemed nervous, evasive, his answers clipped and rehearsed. When questioned, Robinson denied involvement. He claimed he had discovered nothing unusual and offered little insight. Yet inconsistencies began to surface. His timeline didn't align perfectly. His behavior seemed oddly detached for a man of faith confronted with such horror. Investigators searched his belongings. They found a letter opener, a potential weapon, though it was never conclusively tied to the crime. Still, suspicion lingered. The church, however, closed ranks. Robinson was protected by the institution, shielded from deeper scrutiny. Detectives faced resistance, whispers of secrecy, and the weight of an organization reluctant to expose one of its own. Without clear forensic evidence, the case stalled. Robinson remained a suspect, but not charged. The murder of Sister Margaret faded into the shadows of unsolved crimes, leaving the community haunted and the sisters without justice. But the chapel had not given up its secrets. Evidence remained, waiting for the day when science and persistence would bring the truth back into the light. For the sisters at Mercy Hospital, the chapel never felt the same again. The altar where Sister Margaret had prayed was now a place of shadows, haunted by memory. The murder shocked Toledo, but as weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled. Father Gerald Robinson remained a suspect, but without conclusive forensic evidence, police could not press charges. The church's influence loomed large, shielding him from scrutiny. Files were quietly closed, and the case slipped into the category of unsolved. Yet the silence was deceptive. Behind closed doors, whispers persisted. Detectives who had worked the case never forgot the brutality of the crime. Some believed Robinson's involvement was obvious, but the lack of proof kept them powerless. For the sisters, grief hardened into quiet endurance. They carried on their duties, but the memory of Sister Margaret's death lingered in every prayer. The community, too, felt the wound. A crime committed in a sacred space, left unresolved. Years turned into decades. Robinson continued his life as a priest, officiating Mass, hearing confessions, serving the faithful. To the public, he was a man of God. To those who remembered the case, he was a shadow, a reminder of justice denied. But evidence does not vanish, it waits. And by the early 2000s, advances in forensic science and renewed determination would breathe life back into the case. The silence of the cold years was about to break. By the early 2000s, Sister Margaret's murder had become a ghost story in Toledo. The case was unsolved, the files gathering dust, and Father Gerald Robinson still serving as a priest. For many, justice seemed impossible. But persistence has a way of resurrecting truth. In 2003, a woman came forward with allegations of abuse within the church. As investigators dug into her claims, they stumbled upon the old case of Sister Margaret. The brutality of the crime, the suspicious circumstances, and Robinson's proximity to the chapel reignited interest. Detectives reopened the files. This time, they had something the original investigators lacked: advances in forensic science. Bloodstain pattern analysis, DNA testing, and new methods of examining physical evidence offered fresh possibilities. The altar cloth, preserved for decades, became the centerpiece. Forensic experts studied the blood patterns, the cuts, the alignment of wounds. They discovered that the shape of the stab marks matched a letter opener owned by Robinson. The cloth told a story, one of ritualistic violence, deliberate placement, and a killer who had tried to mask his crime in symbolism. The breakthrough was undeniable. Evidence that had once seemed inconclusive now pointed directly to Robinson. The whispers of suspicion hardened into certainty. After 23 years of silence, the case was alive again. And this time, the church could not shield its priest from the storm that was coming. In 2006, 26 years after Sister Margaret Ann Pahl's murder, Father Gerald Robinson walked into a courtroom not as a priest, but as a defendant. The case that had once been buried under silence and secrecy was now alive, its evidence sharpened by forensic science and persistence. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, parishioners, and survivors filled the benches, their eyes fixed on the man in clerical collar who had long been shielded by the church. For many, it was surreal, a priest accused of murdering a nun in her own chapel. The prosecution laid out its case with precision. They presented the altar cloth, preserved for decades, its bloodstains and cuts aligned with Robinson's letter opener. Forensic experts testified that the wounds on Sister Margaret's body matched the weapon. The spray of blood, the ritualistic arrangement of stab wounds, all pointed to deliberate, symbolic violence. Witnesses spoke of Robinson's odd behavior on the day of the murder, his evasive answers, his proximity to the chapel. The prosecution painted him as a man hiding behind faith, using the church as a shield while carrying a dark secret. The defense fought back. They argued the evidence was circumstantial, that decades of time had eroded certainty. They claimed Robinson was a scapegoat, a priest caught in the crossfire of suspicion and scandal. They pointed to the lack of direct DNA evidence, the gaps in the timeline, the possibility of another killer. But the jury listened closely. The weight of the forensic breakthroughs, the alignment of wounds, the persistence of investigators. It was too strong to ignore. After weeks of testimony, the verdict came. Father Gerald Robinson was found guilty of the murder of Sister Margaret Ann Pahl. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The courtroom erupted, some in relief, others in disbelief. For the sisters, it was justice delayed but not denied. For the community, it was a reckoning, the realization that even those cloaked in faith could betray trust in the most horrific way. Robinson sat quietly as the sentence was read, his face expressionless. The priest who had once stood at the altar now stood condemned, his collar replaced by prison bars. The verdict landed like thunder. After 26 years of silence, the murder of Sister Margaret Ann Pahl had a name, a face, and a sentence. Father Gerald Robinson, once cloaked in the authority of the church, was now a convicted murderer. For the Sisters of Mercy Hospital, the conviction was bittersweet. Justice had come, but decades too late. They had lived with the memory of Sister Margaret's death, praying for closure, and now they finally had it. Yet the wound of betrayal cut deep. A priest, entrusted with faith and community, had desecrated their sanctuary. The Catholic Church faced its own reckoning. For years, Robinson had been protected, shielded from suspicion, his collar serving as armor against scrutiny. The trial exposed not only his crime, but the institution's reluctance to confront it. Parishioners struggled with disbelief. How could a man of God commit such an act? How could the church have allowed him to serve for decades after suspicion first arose? The media seized on the story. Headlines painted it as a murder cloaked in faith, a chilling reminder that evil can hide in sacred places. True crime audiences were captivated, but for Toledo, it was personal. The case was not just about a murder, it was about trust shattered, faith betrayed, and justice delayed. Robinson was sentenced to 15 years to life. He entered prison quietly, stripped of his collar, his identity reduced to an inmate number. For the community, his conviction was both a relief and a tragedy. Relief that justice had been served, tragedy that it had taken so long. The legacy of Sister Margaret's murder was no longer silence. It was a story of persistence, of forensic science breaking through decades of secrecy, of justice finally catching up to betrayal. The story endures because it is more than a crime. It is a parable of betrayal and persistence, of faith and corruption, of silence and truth. Today, the Mercy Hospital Chapel stands restored, its altar once again a place of prayer. But for those who remember, the shadows remain. Sister Margaret's devotion is honored, her memory preserved, and her story told, not as a forgotten tragedy, but as a legacy of resilience and justice.